Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today for episode number 103, I am joined by Bryan Smith. Bryan, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good. I mean, we had a game this week with Ballesteros, Shaw, Horton. It's a fun time to be a Cub fan in general. Definitely a fun time to also be someone that followed a lot of these guys from the beginning.
Yeah, dude. I've been watching a lot more Major League Cubs this year
Yeah,
compared to like previous years. And I think part of that is the Major League team is more exciting in general, but
right.
part of that is because like we're watching Cade Horton and Moises Ballesteros and Matt Shaw make their debuts in Chicago. It's like this wave, we've been talking about this wave. I think I talked about it on last episode. We've been talking about this wave for a hot minute. I feel
Yeah,
like. I mean, since 2021, essentially, right when all the trade offs happened is when we and PCA. I didn't even mention PCA. Obviously,
right.
PCA the Cubs prospect, but I posted a couple days ago the 40. I don't know if it was the active. I think it was the active roster I posted and like went through, and there were so many homegrown guys, whether they were like truly homegrown or they were acquired when they were double A, like Ben Brown, where it's like homegrown ish, right?
Right.
Or guys that have been pitch labbed, like Brad Keller, where it's like, yeah, it's not really homegrown, but like they put their own little spin on what he is. But it's like there's a
Yeah.
lot of like homegrown stuff going on the Cubs major league roster. It's like we've been waiting on. We've been saying this is going to happen. I promise this is going to happen. I promise. We've been saying it for the past literally 4 years, and so for it to actually happen is fun.
Yeah, it feels good when you feel like the developmental, I don't know, machine is working. And yeah, we're probably 12 games or so away from Shaw losing his prospect status, about a
Yeah.
month from Horton losing it. And, it seems like he's going to stick and probably for the month of June at least, and probably lose his status. So it'll be wild to be at the end of June and, have a very different looking top five. And then of course the draft will happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty decent chance that not only decent chance. I think there's a really good shot of whoever the Cubs draft in the first round to be a top top at least top five prospect in the Cubs organization this
Five, yeah.
by the end of this year, right?
Yeah, five for sure. I would say three might be tricky. It probably depends if Ballesteros loses his prospect
True.
status or not. But
That's true. So we saw this week. We have a few items on the docket here today. We're not going to go too awful long compared to most episodes, but um, you and I hadn't talked about this pre show here, Bryan. But I thought it was interesting that we saw Miguel Amaya go down at the major league level, and Moises Ballesteros was not the catcher, quote unquote
sure,
catcher, called up to Chicago. So that's probably worth just a couple minutes here. But
yeah,
obviously, the Cubs called up Reese McGuire instead of Moises Ballesteros, and I mean, I said it after Miguel Amaya went down, and we've been talking about it for months now that it would be pretty telling as to how the Cubs think of Moises Ballesteros' defense right now, not in the future, but like right this very second. If he were to be called up, if there was an injury to Carson Keller and Miguel Amaya, it's kind of like I think you talk about it a lot where the Rule 5 draft every year is a really good opportunity to see how organizations truly think about their prospects, right?
yeah.
Like if
Puts them
they
to a decision.
yeah, it's like they show publicly, not just like internally or what we're hearing or whatever. Like they're showing publicly what they think about their prospects if they think that they need to protect them from the Rule 5 draft or not. And this circumstance with Ballesteros felt like that public display of how, like, what do you think about this prospect in a very specific circumstance, not overall, but in a very specific circumstance.
Absolutely, because I mean he's already on the 40-man roster. He was on it to fill the DH spot when the outfielders were dinged up a little bit. And so when the catcher position gets dinged up, the easiest thing by far is to not manipulate your 40-man roster, to just use the depth that's on there. The Cubs do that all the time. They choose, if you're looking at a reliever spot, they choose the easiest arm on the 40-man roster rather than make the tough move more often than not. And they did the opposite with the catcher position. So yeah, I think that definitely tells us something. I was almost wondering, do you fill the time by bringing up McGuire and Ballesteros, and you go three catchers for a little bit, and then that gives you the leeway to say, hey, Ballesteros, maybe he starts against a pretty good righty and catches, but only for 5 innings. And then when the relievers come in, now you still have the depth with the three catchers to bring McGuire in then, and then you still get the benefit of Ballesteros' bat for half those games, but that might have been a move too many to do. That's probably overthinking it a little bit, but we still haven't heard how long Amaya's out for. So, there might still be decision making to do around that position.
And if Reese McGuire keeps hitting 2 home runs every game, then we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, it takes care of itself.
Exactly. All right, man. Let's talk a little bit of pitching today, because I know that there's actually, hold on. Before the majority of the show is going to take up pitching, let's talk about Jonathon Long while we're on the topic of hitters, and then we'll get into the rest of the show is dedicated to pitchers. But it's worth talking about Jonny Long, because what he's doing right now is pretty incredible. He is statistically been terrific, and I talked about him a little bit on last week's episode, so we don't want to just rehash how good he's been, but I do want to frame this conversation of he's been so good, maybe it's time for him to no longer be in AAA in Iowa. And I know we talked about this quite a bit in our episode, our 60-minute episode dedicated to Moises Ballesteros, on essentially how does Moises get up to Chicago? How is he promoted up there? Where does he fit in? All that good stuff. Let's have a much, much shorter conversation about Jonathon Long and how he might fit in Chicago after we're looking at him now, seeing that he's too impressive, I guess, for AAA Iowa. So I guess I'll broadly open it up to you. Like, what are your thoughts on Jonny Long in AAA, and what are your thoughts on him being in the major leagues, Chicago, elsewhere? I'll just open it up to you.
Yeah. He'll, by the time some people hear this, he'll probably have won the Player of the Month for May in the Cubs minor leagues, I would imagine. As far as major leagues go, I mean, you were talking about how this kind of shows what the Cubs think of Ballesteros defensively. Another thing that I'm thinking about Jonny Long is Matt Shaw going up to the major leagues allowed the idea of exploring more position versatility with Jonny Long, and they have not done that. He's only played first base since April 17th. It's only been first base or DH. And so I think that tells us a little bit about what they think about him defensively, which means that I think for the purposes of 2025, he's really only a first base or DH option at the major league level. Maybe there's other positions down the road, but just for this year, I think that we're sort of left to believe it's only that. In which case, to me, Ballesteros probably has the first crack at a DH spot in the majors now with the 40-man spot. So we're probably only talking about first base in my mind, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. And
that's a Bush injury.
That's a Bush. Because I don't even know that it's a Justin Turner injury or DFA. Like I think that it has to be a Michael Bush injury to get him up there. I'm really disappointed that they don't have him playing some third base or left field or right. I mean, just corner outfield. I think that he did start off the year playing a little bit. Like you're right, a little bit. He's played 4 games there so far this year, and the first I guess
at third base,
at third base. The first 3 weeks or so of the year, that's where he was filling in from time to time. But since Matt Shaw went back up to Chicago, that was the perfect opportunity to say, okay, like when Shaw was in Iowa, of course Jonathon Long
had to play third base every day.
Yeah, Matt Shaw is there at third base. But when Shaw got promoted up, it's like, all right, now shift Jonny Long over there, get him some reps. And I think since Shaw has returned to Chicago, the third baseman in Iowa have been, I think, 4 games of Chase Strumpf, a couple games of Dixon Machado, and then a couple games of Ben Cowles. And with all due respect to specifically Chase Strumpf, I would never badmouth Chase Strumpf on the show, and Dixon Machado. Like, if you really want to prioritize Jonathon Long's defensive versatility or defensive value, then Chase Strumpf and Dixon Machado are not going to stop that from happening,
Right. And so, Chase can go to first base so easily. He has plenty of history there.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And Dixon Machado is a minor league vet, major league vet. And so, that's just been so disappointing to me.
The other thing I'll note is that in this month of May, for Long, he has a 466 BABIP. And so if you're talking about, building, the Cubs probably have projection models internally that are far more advanced than anything that we even have on the outside. But, they're going to smooth out that number. He's certainly not going to hit that number in the major leagues. And so if you smooth that out to call it, if you call it 375 or something, and that batting average ends up dropping, 80 points for the month as a result, the numbers are going to look a little more, they're still going to be impressive, but they're not going to look like he's absolutely just, banging the door down to get in the majors. So especially given the fact that he doesn't need to be added to the 40-man roster this offseason for the Rule 5, like, I think it would take really specific scenarios. And to me, that's, like you said, it's not just a Turner injury. I don't think that's enough. I think it's a Bush injury, maybe mixed with Turner complete ineffectiveness. And he's been turning the corner. So maybe they would just go with Turner for a while, not even mess around, still go with Ballesteros as sort of the bat off the bench. So he would be like the secondary option there. So I don't think we're there yet. But that doesn't mean that what Jonny Long's doing is not impressive. I think he's gone up prospect lists. I think he's got to be in a top 10 now, probably even in that discussion in like the 7-8 range. And that's a meaningful step forward. And, he's starting to sort of be an imprint on Cubs options for 2026 and beyond. So that's a huge step forward.
You say his BABIP in May is 466?
I believe so.
Because his BABIP over the course of the season is also 466.
Okay.
So he's
confirmed 466.
He's consistent on that, that's for sure. Consistent on a stat that is wildly inconsistent as far as from players to players go. But I talked about it a little bit on last week's show, where it's like that BABIP is just wildly high, like comically high. And then pair that with the fact that he's both walking and striking out at averages that are like worse than league average on both of those stats. Like there's a little bit of there's a facade there to a certain degree, but on the other end of the spectrum, I also talked about this. He's hitting the ball really hard. It's not just like he's putting up this good slash line. Like he's got the underlying metrics to prove that he's hitting the ball very hard. Some of the highest hard hit percentage in all of minor league baseball. Same with barrel rates, all that good stuff. So he's been terrific. But you're right. I think all it comes down to is like it just doesn't fit with the roster. Like he just doesn't fit with the roster how it stands right now. It was hard enough to find a spot for Moises Ballesteros, let alone Jonathan Long. And so, I think that he does mess around and get some top 10 love at this like midseason prospect ranking update. And that's coming from me, who I say
hard for you to get a first baseman there.
Yeah, time and time again, I will shout that finding spots for a first baseman in a top 10 prospect ranking is super tough. But it's hard to argue with a guy that's 23 years old. It's not like he's 26 in AAA. He's 23 years old and putting up these numbers.
The other cool thing for Jonny is, if the Cubs find a midseason trade that he happens to be in because another team is demanding him, like that team that acquires him is going to put him in the majors. And so, the work that he's doing, it's not like in vain. It's not going to be like, blocking him from the major leagues for so long. It's, he's playing for a team that's contending. He's either going to be an option in 2026 when he's sort of more of a 40-man roster candidate with the Cubs, or he's going to be an option for a losing team that acquires him like late July, early August. So he's doing the work to put himself in the right positions.
Yeah, I think he's a big time trade candidate. I think that I could see him being part of like for a top of the rotation starter, where it's like a current top 5 prospect in the organization, plus him, plus like
a high upside guy.
Yeah, exactly, a high upside guy. So I think that like and that's a compliment to him, where he's put himself in that conversation. Like that's awesome. That's good for him, All right, man. Are we done hitting? You want to transition to pitching, which is kind of the talk of both the major league and minor league levels?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I was kind of thinking the context of our pitching discussion is almost like around who the third best pitching prospect in the Cubs system is. Like Horton, obviously a top while he's still a prospect. Jaxon, Wiggins firmly now the guy behind that. And then, the guys that we're going to talk about today are all sort of the people that I think are being talked about as that next player. I think, we probably have an opinion that it's still the name that we talked about in the offseason, but there are a couple of guys that are pitching their way into those conversations. So it's worth talking about.
Who do you want to hit on first here?
Well, I think I think Ryan Gallagher is probably the hottest name in the system. He's done the most impressive things lately, so I think we should start there. It'll be interesting who gets named the pitcher of the month in May between Gallagher and another guy we'll talk about. But man, Gallagher's just striking everybody out. He had a 6-inning no-hit start. He had 12 strikeouts in an outing recently, so he's been really impressive, and I think it's worth talking about it whether he's in that discussion or not.
Yeah, this over the course of the season, he's down to a 3, and for a while there, he didn't really have like the ERA type numbers to match the strikeout and walk number. Like it was kind of a weird profile statistically over the course of the season. But he's now logged. He started 7 games. He's pitched 30 2/3 of an inning, and he has a 3.23 ERA. He struck out over those 30-ish innings. He struck out 40 guys, walked 11 dudes, 1.17 WHIP. He's striking out almost 12 batters per 9 innings, which has been terrific for him. And kind of, we were looking for somebody from that draft class last year to like really like show out, really like prove that like they're here, like I'm the guy that you should be paying attention to. And I think that like Evan Aschenbeck held us over to a certain degree when
Right.
he was at a level in Myrtle Beach where he was way too old and way too advanced to be down at a low A level. Like that was kind of like, oh, like that's going to hold us over, right? But let's get someone that really shows out and really proves that like he is the guy we should be paying attention to. Ryan Gallagher has definitely been that guy so far.
Yeah, so I watched his last 3 starts real close. Kind of wrote up a scouting report that for now I just put on our 1060 West Discord. Might throw it elsewhere, but I could talk through a little bit of that here. And the interesting thing about Gallagher, I think, just when you watch him, is his release point is as sort of over the top as a release point gets. I think baseball's sort of going lower and lower on release points, but they also like, the common thing in baseball is just be unique. And, if you're just a guy who throws with that sort of high 3/4 spot, like that's sort of the no man's land. Gallagher's not that. Gallagher's way more over the top. He's getting a lot of strikeouts. I would say listening to Brendan talk about him in South Bend broadcast, Brendan loves his changeup. He's been really impressed that he throws it against righties some. I feel like he's probably gotten more strikeouts on his slider. And they've talked about on the broadcast that he's working on that pitch behind the scenes quite a bit, that he's trying to get the velocity up. I think it was like more low 80s to start the year. I think when I watched him this stretch, it's sitting more like 83, even touched, I think 86 in an outing at one point. But I think, more probably been bumped a tick or two. And it's kind of I'm trying to think of who to compare it to. It's like a straight down sort of gyro slider. It's not, doesn't have that horizontal that other guys have. I don't think you're going to get that from that arm slot as much.
Merriweather is like the prime example of what that, when it's working, an ideal gyro slider, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's a good example. And then fastball wise, I mean, he executes his fastball. I think it has good carry. The Midwest League has gotten really hard to track velocities. It seems like every stadium has issues as far as being able to rely on those numbers. So I literally in those 3 starts saw him touch every number between 87 and 96 miles per hour. So I have no idea exactly, where he's sitting these days. I get the feeling that it's like he's sitting 92-ish. And I do think that you get a pretty good amount of variance. So I guess my sort of long take on him is that I'm really impressed by how he's executing during this stretch. I'm not yet able to say that he has the stuff profile to make him a top 10 prospect in the system. I think that he's going to need each of his pitches to get better to be the kind of guy that could be a major league starter. But for you to be at that level and just executing the way he does, to have a clear plan, to be able to, touch all 4 pitches as often as he does, those are all the right foundation blocks. Now it's just keep getting better and better with your stuff.
Yeah, I kind of view Ryan Gallagher in, I think they're different pitchers. They do it differently. But in terms of a general timeline and how he can improve is looking at what Will Sanders did from last year to this year. Obviously, different circumstances. Like they pitched differently, and I don't want to compare these two. But what I'm thinking about is that Will Sanders last year in 2024, he spent time down in South Bend and got that one start worth of time in Double-A Tennessee last year, and he just showed flashes where he was like, man, like I want to believe in this guy. Like I want to like him more than I do in terms of what he's showing on the mound. And then he very clearly put in a ton of work over the offseason, like to get stronger, and he added a new pitch and all these different things that like he worked over the offseason. So then he came into 2025 as being wildly impressive this year. Like Will Sanders has been just super, super impressive. And so I could see that same script followed by Ryan Gallagher, where it's like, all right, like there's a lot to like in Ryan Gallagher in 2025. He's spending his time in South Bend. Maybe he gets a cup of coffee in Tennessee or in Knoxville to end the season, and then follow the Will Sanders script, where just put in work over this next offseason and come and be assigned to back to Double-A Knoxville in 2026 and really take off. And that's my ideal view of Ryan Gallagher, but we know that it doesn't always work out that way. But that'd be great. I would love that.
Yeah, I mean that's what the lab and all the work that they do to get their pitching coaches as smart as they are behind the scenes is there for. I think Gallagher still has a little bit of projection left in him. I think he could get a little bit stronger, and that's going to only help with getting that velocity up a little bit. He doesn't use his legs as much as other guys. So I think that there's room to improve, and the fact that you're improving from a base that's already sort of prone to get this much swing and miss is a really good thing. And, the other thing that I think we've said before about guys is like when the swing and miss numbers are a lot higher than you would expect from the stuff, that means that there's some like deception stuff happening that's sort of hard for us to just see on video. And I believe that that's true, especially with a unique arm angle. So, if you can get that stuff up a little bit and maintain the deception, like, that's a good way to sort of build a back end career for yourself.
I believe that he still has a top 3 swinging strike rate in the entire organization this year, which is, I did not see that guy. I think it's him and Nick Dean are 1 and 2 right now for swinging strike rate. So that's super fun for sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk just a little bit about Will Sanders. I know I hit on him a little bit, but and I also hit on him last week. I think we've been talking. Will Sanders might be the pitcher that we've talked about the most so far this season on the podcast, but he deserves that attention. He's been really, really impressive. I think that he's at the point where, given his development timeline, given how good he looks in Double-A Knoxville, and the third item, there is not a whole lot of starting pitchers in Iowa right now. Right. I think that we see a promotion for Will Sanders up to AAA Iowa very soon, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I wonder if they'll go Antonio Santos first, because maybe he has more sort of just major league, like sort of stop, just fill in a gap. And so that maybe Sanders has another month to go or something. But yeah, it won't be long. He's been so good. I mean, he had back-to-back starts, 5 innings, only 2 hits allowed, no walks, 6 innings, only 1 hit allowed, no walks. Was not quite as sharp the last time out, but still very solid. And so yeah, he's pitching great. He's executing really well. He's got the newer cutter this year. I think I got to look up how he was against lefties last year, because I just feel like he's so much better against them. Actually, no, he was reverse split guy last year. So I stand corrected, but it does seem like he has just a real full arsenal against lefties this year. And then I think that slider against righties is just much improved, and the velocity numbers are a little up. He just, to me, that's the guy that's taken a step forward. If that guy's, maybe the number 10 prospect in the system when we do an update around the draft, I would not be surprised. And I don't think that that's like a reflection of a bad system. I think he's earning to be in that discussion, especially, I mean, dude, he hasn't walked anyone since May 6th. I mean, he's like what Brandon Birdsell did last year in that. Remember that he had that stretch in June of last year where he didn't walk anybody and just kept finding success and success. Sanders is having that right now. He's on that sort of same track that Birdsell was on when he won Player of the Year last year.
I picked the wrong guy. Before the season, I was like, Sam Armstrong is going to be the Brandon Birdsell of 2025. I kept
Right.
beating the drum on that, and little did I know it's actually going to be Will Sanders, which I honestly never would have predicted that it was Will Sanders based on the type of pitcher that he was last year, not based on not believing in him. It was that he wasn't this guy that was walking 4.6% of the batters he faces. He's got a sub 5% walk rate this season. He is throwing more strikes than anybody else in the system. He's throwing 70% of his pitches are strikes, which is an outrageous number, and he's still getting swings and misses, which is fun.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, man,
great. And it was 10% last year. And, I think that he would get deep into counts last year and not really have the proper way to finish hitters. And that just that like sort of erodes at bats and ends up getting you to walk guys. And he doesn't have that problem this year. It's way more able to just finish them off.
Here's a deeper cut. He has the lowest, he throws the fewest pitches per inning in the entire Cubs farm system. He only throws 14.1 pitches per inning this year, which is, like, for example, let me look at like Cade Horton was throwing 15, which was an incredibly low number for him as well. But like, who else? Like Evan Oschenbeck, who we were talking about earlier, who is like a pitch to contact type of guy. Like Evan Oschenbeck is only walking 6.8% of the batters he faces, but he's throwing 16 pitches per inning. Like, it's crazy what Will Sanders is doing. That's kind of a deeper cut thing, but like, yeah, it's just crazy what Will Sanders is doing. So, yeah, he is the guy, in my opinion, who is in direct competition with Brandon Birdsell for that next in line pitching prospect behind Horton and Jaxon Wiggins, for sure.
Totally agree. And yeah, I think Brandon, we're hoping for good signs of Brandon being back soon here, right?
Yeah, so we saw Brandon Birdsell throwing live to hitters this past week is when it was, I believe, and I think we might see a couple more weeks or so of him down in Mesa before getting some sort of rehab assignment. I'd assume he goes rehab assignment. I assume they go South Bend or something before getting promoted up to Iowa, where he belongs, because I think that going from Mesa to Iowa would be quite the jump. But yeah, I think that we should probably expect a couple more weeks if everything goes to plan. I think we can expect a couple more weeks of him down in Mesa, a start or two in a place like South Bend, and then back on the track to Chicago, spending some time in Iowa the rest of the season. So that's hopefully the timeline for him. And man, it's so unfortunate that injury happened with Brandon Birdsell, because given how the Cubs have plowed through their starting pitcher depth this year, I mean, like he'd be on track to fill in some starts, especially with Ben Brown struggling in Chicago in the rotation right now.
He would have either started a game by now, or we'd be talking about him as like next man up at this moment.
Yep. I mean, right now you've got, obviously the Cubs have Shota and Steele and Assad all out with injuries.
Yeah.
The Iowa roster, if you go look at the Iowa roster, and it cracks me. I mean, like, it's so sad the amount of starting pitchers that they have on the injured list, and some of those guys enter the season on the injured list. Obviously, Chris Clark and Walker Powell and Cole Franklin obviously did, but they've got 5 starting pitchers that are currently on the injured list in Iowa, and so that leaves guys like Kenta Maeda and Tommy Romero in that Iowa rotation. And Connor Noland, I think, is just not quite ready to fill in as needed in Chicago. But I think that Brandon Birdsell would be, and so yeah, if I just wish he was healthy right now to kind of fill in that spot and fill in that extreme need that the Cubs have.
Yeah, Jordan Wicks went down this week. Yep. Peter Solomon was pitching well. He got injured. So yeah, the Cubs are in a precarious position, and they will be so hungry for anyone like Birdsell, and even maybe Sanders, if Sanders gets the AAA call. Like, they're sort of, I mean, they're good enough to be able to say, like, kind of screw the 40 man. Like, we got to go with the arm that makes the most sense for this team. So, like, the door is open. If Jaxon Wiggins wants to go on a heater here, like, they'll make a spot for somebody who really, really forces their way, because the pitching staff just needs someone to do that.
Yeah, agreed. All right. What else you got as far as pitch? I know you want to talk a little bit about Brooks Caple, right? You did
Brooks
some
Caple, I think,
watching.
sort of the other guy who's in competition with Gallagher, I think, for player of the month. I think, I think there's a good chance that South Bend is awaiting him, if, maybe this week, maybe it's one more start, but his last start, he got to 6 full innings. Honestly, it was one of those starts where, and we talk about this a lot with especially with college players in Myrtle Beach, where he threw some pretty bad pitches that guys hit with about as much gusto as that individual guy in low A is able to hit it, and it was a flyout, and it's like I think when you get to that point where guys are having just complete success with pitches that are down the middle that hitters in low A just can't do anything with, it's time to move on. And that was a little bit his last outing there. Now, in general, I will say I've been really impressed with Caple. I might prefer his stuff profile to Gallagher still. Okay. He's got 2 fastballs. One's like a cut fastball. One's more of a sort of traditional, just with a little bit of run. I don't know if that's 4-seam, 2-seam, or if it's a true cutter grip mixed with a 4-seam. But he threw a lot of changeups his last outing. I didn't love that changeup early in the season, but it's looking better. I think it's a pitch that he's comfortable with. He throws a slider, and then he throws a curveball. And every broadcast they mention that the curveball is called a death ball. He must have written on a piece of paper at the start of the year his arsenal, and it says death ball.
It's on the media guide. It's on the media guide written.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like, especially if you catch a broadcast from an opposing team, it's always talked about. It's like one of those things. And but what that tells me is he's a guy sort of willing to tinker, willing to keep up with how the game's evolving and what pitches make sense. And that's a good sign. I almost feel like his changeup looks a little bit like a splinker to me. So, and if you throw a death ball, who's to say that you don't also throw a splinker? So I like that about him. He's a big dude. He does not have much projection left, as opposed to Gallagher. Like, this is, what you see is what you get. Probably he might be a little more Sam Armstrong than he is sort of like super legit prospect, but like, time will tell on that. I dig him. I want him in South Bend.
35 innings this year for Brooks Caple, 1.8 ERA. Obviously super impressive. 1.09 whip. The swinging strike and like CSW type numbers aren't quite as good. 10.4% swinging strike rate, 25 CSW, which those are below average in the system this year.
Okay.
But opponents just aren't hitting. Like you said, they're not squaring him up. He's getting lots of ground balls for Brooks Caple.
He throws that cutter an awful lot. And, to me, that cutter can often be a barrel missing pitch. Mm-hmm. And that would sort of jive with the arsenal.
Yeah. 543 OPS against is like that. That's pretty much all like, in terms of the contact quality, that's all you need to see in terms of what opposing hitters are doing against them. So yeah, man, I think that it's fun. I was the first to admit that entering this year, that all of those arms, the college arms the Cubs drafted last year, I was like, all of them ran together for me. Because we didn't get to. That's the thing with drafting college arms, is you don't get to see them, or even I guess high school arms, but you don't get to see them in their draft year at all playing anymore. Like, you used to see a guy getting drafted and then throwing 10 innings in Myrtle Beach or South Bend.
Right.
That used to be the norm. I think at this point we're not going to see that anymore. I don't.
And the Cubs drafted a bunch of players from tiny schools that you couldn't even go back and watch much tape. I mean, Caple's from Lamar, I believe, and it seemed like every name they picked last year was from somewhere small. So it was hard for us to sort of do the normal preseason prep to have the familiarity with these guys. But to me, Gallagher and Caple are the two that have sort of risen up to be legitimate prospects, and I think we're probably one level from each of them from seeing like how legitimate is it really. And I mean, that'll be one of the stories to watch in the second half.
That's Braden Reisdorf erasure right there.
That's true. Yeah. Braden continuing to shove post his move to South Bend. So that's really cool.
I mean, yeah. If Braden Reisdorf if they keep him in the bullpen, I love a relief prospect, like a guy who is a relief
You
prospect all
love
the
a
way up.
relief
You know I
prospect.
do. It's well, it's like it's unique, and a lot of the guys like that, like whether it's guys we've talked about for years, like Frankie Scalzo or Riley Martin, guys like that, like those were also. Well, I guess Riley Martin technically started at the beginning of his career with the Cubs, right? But
Yeah.
those are like relief prospects only, and they're not going to be top 20 prospects in the organization or anything. And even Jack Neely, like I think we both squeezed Jack Neely into the top 20, like around 15 or so on our prospect rankings. And like, those aren't guys that are going to be highly ranked because they're just not going to compile a whole lot of WAR at the major league level. Like, they're not going to provide that value. And the likelihood that they do is pretty low. But like, I think part of the reason why I like guys like Braden Reisdorf and stuff like that is just because by the time you're getting to the back end of some of these games, when we're tuned in for some of these games, it's like I'm not tuning in for the relief outings for a whole lot of dudes.
Right.
So if I can latch onto somebody to watch towards the end of these games, like I'm about it. I love to get that action.
And Reinsdorf has that God, I almost called him Reinsdorf.
Yeah, that's right.
Shoot, he's not a future former White Sox owner. He's a reliever, but he's got that relief gene where he just attacks guys with that fastball. I mean, what he wants to do is he wants to throw a fastball in the top third every single pitch and make you come beat him. And that's fun to watch. Like, if you like baseball, it doesn't matter what level you're watching. If you get a reliever who just wants to challenge, that's one of the joys of watching the sport.
Yep. All right, man. Last name I had on my list here is just wanted to briefly mention that Erian Rodriguez made his return to action this past week for South Bend, which you got the chance to dig in a little bit in depth with that outing, right?
I had to watch him. He's my dude.
Yeah, so I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But I just think overall, seeing Erian Rodriguez, and I know that you and I were both high on Erian entering the season. Obviously, was down with an injury, worked his way back, now is healthy again. But when we're talking about that, like, third best pitching prospect in the organization, I don't think that Erian Rodriguez right now is competing with Will Sanders or Brandon Birdsell necessarily. But like, if he were to make that jump up, if he were to cement himself as a top 15, top 10 prospect in the organization, it feels like it would be huge for this system.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an impossible thing. I think for me, he was in the discussion in there towards the end of last year. I think he was in the Cubs internal discussions about getting added to the 40-man. I think he just missed, but and then I saw him in spring training. I mentioned this in an episode a month or so ago. Was absolutely phenomenal. And then I believe he must have been hurt at the end of that start and then didn't pitch for a long time. And he just came up to South Bend, struggled. I believe, did he let up a home run to the first hitter he faced?
It was in the first inning. I'm not sure if it was the first one.
It might have been like hard hit ball and then home run, or it was a home run, but the first three batters were ugly, and it looked like one of those outings where, like, okay, he's just rusty, it's not going to go well. And then he got through 5 innings, and he was not his best. It looked to me like the velocity was down. The numbers we were seeing from the South Bend broadcast were more like 91s and stuff, which, you're not going to be in that discussion for the third, fourth, fifth best pitching prospect in the system at 91. But the changeup looked better. The slider looked solid. He looked a little stronger. So
strikes.
Yeah.
He was definitely
through strikes, which early in his career was certainly not a given. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad he's back. He's an important arm, especially like, man, the Cubs got him. He's as raw as a player could be. And they've turned him into at least something. And what he is, we'll see as this year goes along. But just a sort of another feather in the development, pitching development team's hat if he can be something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he probably spends a while, if not the entire season, in South Bend. Don't you think? Well, they'll want to get him up to Knoxville
we'll just
because
see how he goes. I think he'll be a performance determined guy probably, but I mean, what I want to see is, he doesn't have to throw 98 like I think he touched a few times last year, but like let's let's get back to 95. Let's show that this injury didn't like take us back 3 steps.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, man. Any other names that we missed here?
No. We were talking about names that graduated from the minor leagues at the beginning of the episode, and I want to shout out Danny Valencia because, and just with the reliever conversation we just had, it's been a really cool week for him. I mean, I love the fact that Craig Counsell not only sort of chose Valencia and like almost felt to me like, let's instill some confidence in this kid that we're going to pick him for closer during this time that Porter Hodge is out. And then that first outing in Miami did not go well. I think, he got 2 quick outs and then it went sideways. He blew the save. Wasn't entirely his fault. There was a ball to right that Kyle Tucker probably should have caught. But then, he had a walk and then gave up the walk-off hit. And it could have been one of those things where Counsell just decided we're going to move on. We're going to go with Brad Keller, who's been a little better. But the fact that Counsell stuck with him and that he's had 2 saves since, and he's just continuing to look good, to me, like now we're talking about a guy who's going to believe that he belongs in the major leagues, which I think was the last step missing for him, was just between the ears. Yep. And I think what's going to come from the way that Counsell has handled him is a guy who's going to be a reliever for the team for the next few seasons. And that's exciting.
You can see the mentality shift for
Absolutely.
Valencia over the past few weeks or so. But even before he was this, I guess, closer. He's the closer now.
Yeah.
Even before that, he showed like he looked like he belonged, and so much of that was like we knew the fastball, we knew the stuff was good. We knew the fastball hit 101. We knew that the hit 102. We knew that the splitter and the slider were strong and solid, but really was like, hey, just throw that fastball down the middle, dude, or like aim to throw it down the middle because it's gonna blow by guys, and we don't need you nibbling. Like you're really, really good at baseball, and he looks like he knows he's good at baseball now, which is fun. He's doing his patented pouring water all over the guys during interviews post game, which is like he did that. He did that so much down in South Bend, and so it's fun to see him having fun off the field. It's fun to see him fired up on the field, celebrating and all that good stuff. Because yeah, you're right. Like the stuff has always been there for him to be good enough. But we know with relievers and I mean closers specifically, but relievers in general, how important that is to have that mental side of it all figured out too. He seems to have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just, we talk about all these pitchers and being a step away, or there's always like just that one piece missing. And it's exciting when you see a guy who's starting to sort of answer that last piece. And I think it's happened.
Yep. All right, guys. We're going to wrap that up here today with that. I told you last week on the show that we have a kind of a weird schedule going on as far as who you're seeing on the show and all that good stuff. Still typical release schedule for these coming up on Tuesday mornings, but was not expecting Bryan and I to hop on this morning, but we did. I appreciate it, Bryan. And then so next week, I think what you're looking at is for next week to be Greg Zumac's draft centric episode, and then the following week will be a pre-recorded episode by me, and then from there on we'll figure out what the heck's going on. I don't know. It's all up in the air, but we appreciate you being patient out there. We appreciate you just going with the flow, depending on whoever's on your screen on any given morning. And if you want to subscribe over on the YouTube page on Cubs on Deck. Leave a comment, leave a like if you would. We really appreciate that. Subscribe over on Apple, on Spotify, and all that good stuff. You can follow Bryan over on Blue Sky at Cub Smith. You can find me at Out of the Vines. You can find us talking prospects a lot over on the 1060 West Discord channel. We're doing that early and often each day. So come check us out over there. In the meantime, we'll be back in your ears in one short week. Thanks, guys.
Go Cubs.